Welcome to the second episode of Let's Start a Dialogue. For this episode, I'll be speaking to one of my closest friends, Griffin Hauben. Griffin is a Penn State graduate with a bachelor's degree in psychology. He is passionate about the nature of causality and how we become the people that we are, as well as how we become the people that we want to be. We went to both middle and high school together, and I've stayed in close contact ever since. We discussed the likes of finding one's voice and identity, learning when to be critical, how to be part of a positive societal system, and much more. We hope you enjoy this conversation between two friends. And now, let's start a dialogue with Griffin Hauben. Hey Griffin, I'm super excited for this conversation. We've been texting for the last week about a lot of things that have gotten super deep over text, but I figured why not just make an episode and then literally see if we can break down all these ideas. So, Griffin Hauben, welcome to Let's Start a Dialogue. You can give a little context about yourself with a brief introduction to anybody that listens. So, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited to be here. When you told me you were starting this podcast, I was already pretty excited. But once the first episode came out and I had a chance to listen to it, I realized how proud I was of you for putting out such actually promising content. And to think that I'd be featured on that same podcast just humbled the hell out of me. But yeah, so I am a recent college graduate. I have a degree in psychology. I specialized in neuroscience. So I really like the real hard science nitty gritty of it. My plan is to eventually become a clinical psychologist. I was thinking about going into research because I really like exploring the new frontiers of that stuff. But I think my talents lie in helping other people. So in the middle of working, getting into grad school and that kind of thing. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay, cool. Also, I don't think anybody knows except for one person. I told our mutual friend Rick that I actually used Griff's song for the intro.
Yeah,
It's going to be playing at the start of this episode too, after I make the introduction after this one. It fit perfectly. I was like, wow, I recorded the first intro and it lasted a minute and the song was a minute and 20. So there's some fade cut off at the end. And I was like, oh, this works. This is good. This is good. This is a sign right here.
Yeah, I'm glad it works.
Yeah. So all right. We really need to try not to hit too many topics for future episodes' sake. And also to get in depth and not swim around so many different things and kind of not really get into the nitty gritty, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Which is something I think a concern we both shared beforehand. So let's just start with this. I sent a doc of just some notes and I put up 3 movies on there because I don't know what it is. I've been weirdly manifesting. Once we started talking about people finding their own voice and identity, I kind of went on this binge of things that just made me keep thinking about voice and identity. And it was, movies like Dead Poet Society, which you said you didn't see, or is that the one you saw?
I have not seen that movie yet.
Great movie. It's with Robin Williams. Yeah. Awesome film. The Truman Show, that's the one you've seen.
I've seen that many times.
Really? Okay, I'm going to rewatch it at some point. I watched it for the first time the other night and I was like, wow. And then kind of documentary with Jim Carrey called Jim and Andy.
The Great Beyond. It's been on my list for way too long.
I highly recommend it. It was very weird, but I think by the end of it, you're that was very worth it. And you understand why it was worth it. But I want to talk about just the insights and ideas I got from those movies. We've discussed a lot of I guess Jordan Peterson-esque ideas, because I know we both listen to him a bit, as well as the people he interacts with.
Modern psychoanalysis.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just start with this. One of the first ideas that we talked about in the past couple of weeks was, I think it was when we were discussing this podcast. Yeah, I was at work and I was texting you. This is what made me actually come up with this idea for the episode before I asked you. We were talking about kind of what direction do podcasts need to take in order to catch kind of an audience, and what audience that would be. And it would be for many different reasons. So, you can go about making a podcast and basing it on a niche of people, where you do a topic that the people will like, or you base it on yourself and hope that the right people find you and enjoy whatever personality it is you bring to your show or whatever shtick it is your show brings. Which got me thinking a lot. I was like, wow, that really is like, at least from what I thought, the two main reasons people kind of get into a podcast, either the personality of the person or the niche of the show. So like My Favorite Murder or whatever those top murder podcasts are would be like people are getting into it for the niche and the theme / topic of the show versus like
content versus creator.
exactly. I mean like Jake Paul's show, people probably for whatever reason love or
People
not Jake
people
Paul,
love that guy. Yeah.
Logan Paul's podcast, Impulsive. I bet people love it less so for the content. Maybe for the content. I don't know. I wouldn't know. He has some cool people on there, but they probably see him as like this figure, this creator, and they're like, wow, I'm gonna watch this stuff. So that got me
Jordan
thinking a
Peterson
lot.
too.
Exactly. Yeah, he's a mix of creator and content.
Well, he being himself just provides a certain content. Just his like bare bones analysis of situations just provides such riveting content. I mean, I think that's in part because of his massive reading list, but and also probably bigger just because of the way he thinks. Because I mean, nobody really like points things out in I mean, at least in the biblical lecture series, he pointed things out about the Bible where you kind of just slap your forehead. It's like, I should have known that. Like, how did I not see that? Like, without him being the driving force, I don't think it would be as appealing.
Yeah. You also have to think too, I mean, he is a professor and that's kind of where his background lays. So, you know, he kind of has his leg up on analytical thinking for the psychology and stuff. But I guess slight tangent that I went on, but bringing it back to voice and identity and stuff. I mean, where do people kind of get their own identity and voice? I mean, throughout our lives, you know, if you think about it, we aren't really the same person we were a week ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, you know. It's almost like, I mean, you could literally be quite literally anything you want one day to the next, which some people do go I feel like through that transformation. Like between middle school and high school, you kind of change a bit, find out what you like, and it's almost like a weird reset. And the same happens between high school and college, and then college and graduation, you go through another reset and kind of figure out more of like where you're at the time. But it's like, yeah, like what is that? Where's that identity like either taking you, or what is spurring the change that or us wanting to change our identity in a way? What do you think about that?
That is a huge question. I feel like you can take it from a number of different points.
Yeah, super
So
loaded.
just to address like the last point of that question, like where does it come from? I think that each individual has this drive that allows us to seek meaning in our own lives. And we can see that through phenomenon. Like if you notice, like when people retire, like usually they don't want to just sit around. They want something to do. Like without meaning, we just fall apart. And I think that's where where the drive for identity comes from, because we're naturally inquisitive of our situation. And if our situation is relatively empty, the questions just become that more overbearing. And I think we attempt to answer those questions in a way that like actually backs itself up and it isn't just like super hollow. And it's really interesting though, because I think that a lot of people will, run around asking like, who am I? Like, what is my identity really? And you hear a lot of people say that kind of thing after they go through like a huge struggle, and it shows them that they're just not prepared for everything like they thought they were. And it seems to me that it's not really that difficult to find out who you are. And instead of just asking the questions, I think you can probably get there just simply by existing.
Exactly. That actually, I think, so you said people are trying to find out who they are, but something I gained like an insight from mainly watching, Jim and Andy, the doc with Jim Carrey, was that it's not necessarily who you are, but who you want to be in a way, because I mean, if you're not the same person as you were last year, last week, I mean, you can literally change. And, instead of feeling like you need to reset at a specific moment in life where you need to like either figure it out or like change for the better, like, oh, I'm going to stop this and then do this instead because it's what people do or it's right for me, just start doing it immediately, just do what, just do what it is you want to do almost. And instead of waiting for the big transitionary moment, just make now that transitionary moment and then not change immediately. What I'm trying to say is I think people are too caught up in staying what they are and feeling that they have to wait for something to happen in order to change. You know what I mean? Which is, I think, a lot of, who am I versus who do I want to be, and finding the balance between, I guess, whatever transition process that would take for you to become or change your mindset to who is it that I want to be and become, and then getting underway to get there. I mean, in the end, I mean, in Jim and Andy, I know you haven't seen it and I don't want to give away too much, but what he, and spoilers for anybody that is listening, although so Jim and Andy is a documentary with Jim Carrey taking on the role of Andy Kaufman, who was like a comic or a stand-up comedian, an actor. I think he was like Jim Carrey's idol, so I'm not really sure how long ago this was, but
it's a very specific style from what I know.
Exactly, yeah. It was kind of like weird. It was weird. It was unsettling at times, and like you're watching him and you're like, what the hell's going on in a way, but it put you at ease because it was weird. You don't have to like be normal anymore,
Yeah.
But when Jim Carrey took the role, he really immersed himself, so much so that he wouldn't let people call him Jim when he was playing Andy, and he would just be Andy all day, which was like really weird at first. You're like, dang, this is annoying, like everybody must be so annoyed with like Jim doing this.
Like, we just want Jim back. What the
exactly.
hell?
And he's just like, I don't know who that is. Like, I'll tell Jim in the trailer, whatever. But, and then as the whole doc progresses, I mean, by the end of it, everyone's like so into him as Andy. It's just like, wow, this is weird. Like, he's really embodied this character. And it makes you think, and Jim Carrey even says this, it's like, he's played roles like The Mask in that movie. And
great movie.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes you think again, like he's literally just putting on a mask for this character, although it's a real person, Andy Kaufman. And it makes you realize like people are treating him like by the end of it as if he was Andy. It's like he's literally just this different person, as well as some other characters throughout the documentary. And you're like, wow, like he's literally no longer Jim Carrey as people knew him before. He's this other, he's somebody totally different. And by the end of it, when he's done with the role, he doesn't like go back to it. He doesn't even want to think about it because you're like, oh, he took a toll. But he was like, I don't even know who I am anymore because I've been playing characters so deeply, which made me like, my head was blown by the end of it. I was like, wow. It's like thinking that at all times we are wearing a mask in a way. But when you're transitioning to whatever you want to become, I mean, like, just pretend you're wearing a mask and just keep changing it,
Exactly. I think that says like two huge things.
Yeah.
Like, first, like you said, the mask is like the whole thing. Like, if you just select the mask, that it seems like if you just select the mask that you wanna occupy, that you will simply become it because you're just claiming to be it already, which shows us something interesting between like what you were saying earlier about how people look for the transition points so that they can become something better. But if you look at the difference between like a normal person's experience, like emphasizing the transition, to Jim Carrey's experience where he simply became the thing and didn't worry about the transition. He literally just became that thing without even thinking about it. He lost his identity and became Andy. But regular people are just like, it's hard for us to think that far ahead.
Yeah. It's like we feel like, I don't know if it's like a weird, I don't want to say stubbornness, like what is it? Like, why do we feel like we're being held back? Is it just ourselves being scared to become whatever it is we really want to become, And not like in a super motivational way, but like small improvement ways, like building different habits and stuff, or like maybe like getting into a new hobby or something, like I feel like people are super scared of just giving up what they already know. It's like,
Well, we're scared of the unknown. We are terrified of going into situations that we don't know how they'll turn out.
mm,
Like, because usually that means it could end one of two ways, good or bad. And just knowing that the bad part of it is even there at all is probably enough to stop a lot of people from even embarking on that journey. I mean, when it comes to like just in general losing your identity, like if you don't know what you're going to become, there's a chance, whether regardless of what percentage chance it is, there's a chance you're going to become something that's worse than what you are now.
you think so? I guess
I mean,
that's true.
that's what I think people are thinking.
I definitely agree. I think that's true. I think people are afraid of losing what they currently have, thinking that it's like,
That's going to be worse.
that it's, yeah, they're comfortable right now. They're afraid of either messing up, some failure, and maybe afraid of not learning from it. But you're right. People are afraid of the unknown, and I guess I don't really want to say challenges, and people take on challenges all the time, but like identity changing or identity finding, transforming challenges are probably extremely scary. I mean, I know it is for me, I'm sure for everybody else, which actually is a good transition to, as we both know, Jordan Peterson's. Something I wanted to talk about that relates to this is his hero story, which is pretty much people going into the unknown. And
Joseph Campbell's archetypes.
yeah, exactly. But you can break it down in different ways. And I think you could really make a case for it here, where it's like, I mean, the general story is what a hero needs to save. I think, is it his dying dad or his dad from
the unknown,
the unknown, the monster, the dragon, whatever it is.
Chaos is
Yeah,
the explicit thing that he says. Yeah,
exactly. And yeah, I obviously don't want to misquote if anybody is. Maybe Jordan Peterson and say, look at this guy. No, but I think that's, kind of a story that can also represent, like, for any reason, anybody going into an unknown and undertaking a challenge, not just to like, save your father, whatever figure. It could also be just, embarking on this journey and finding the dragon, finding the problem, the challenge, and
conquering it.
Exactly, and conquering it. That's where the goal is. It's where you reap the reward of overcoming it. And I feel like people are just too scared to get in that cave and see what the heck's in it. Especially when it comes to life transforming things that make you super uncomfortable.
Well, I think the reason that is an archetype, or the reason that it's so compelling, is because it's something that manifests within all of our lives at some point or another, in some situation, in some form or another. And that's why it's such a strong idea. It's because we all do it at any time. And I think what it says is that we kind of just have to do it.
Yeah.
Like you don't really hear much about the hero, like, being too scared to conquer whatever tribulation that they have to conquer. I mean, they'll show a little bit of fear in most of these stories, but they always end up overcoming their fear. And I think we like resonate with that because we're meant to overcome the fears.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the story itself is basically a projection. It's one of those communal projections from the entirety of our species, where we all have this dream. It's because that's the thing that we really want secretly, all of us. We all want to overcome our fears.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're right. We get incredibly caught up in the unknown, and like and what I think are the negative outcomes of traversing the unknown. But I think it's something that everybody has inside them, and that's why that archetype is so strong.
I think another thing too is like, maybe people like make it almost unrealistic challenges, where it's
we build it up for sure.
Exactly. It's like, let's build it up enough where we won't be able to do it. And that way we're almost reaffirmed when we don't do it saying, oh, I knew I wasn't able to do that.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a win-win, you either get it and you get it, or you don't get it and you're like, oh, I was right the whole time. Kind of transitioning over to like less, I guess, theoretical. People, I think, in real life, like really can just break things up. I mean, it's so cliche. It's all so cliche. Everything is so cliche, and that's why it's cliche.
It's because it happens.
Break things up into smaller challenges and smaller goals. I mean, this brings up the whole bottom down or bottom up approach, that we discussed, and we can discuss and probably will discuss, versus top down, where it's instead of trying to solve the biggest problem to solve all the smaller problems, you solve all the smaller problems.
Smaller problems.
Exactly. And I guess actually now, before we get into how we think people can solve these smaller problems for themselves, can you go into Stand By Me and what that is?
Or Stand Together.
Stand Together. Dang it. I thought it was
the Charles Koch organization.
Yes, exactly.
The Koch brothers organization.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a nonprofit organization that's just super large. I mean, if you Google it, it'll probably show up in like pretty quickly, the company page. My mom recently started working there, and I've been able to share some of the contents of their like community outreach program, stuff like that. And I mean, Charles Koch has a number of books talking about how he got to this point in developing it. Now, he doesn't actually run the nonprofit, but he's kind of like that guiding figure, kind of like in the Nexium cult, how Keith Raniere is the guiding figure of the cult, but actually has no legitimate involvement in the organization. But yeah, something that I've heard Charles Koch harps on just relentlessly is his belief in every individual's ability to take care of themselves. And I've just started reading recently his book, Believe in People: Bottom-Up Solutions for a Top-Down World. And that book, I haven't gotten very far in it yet, but he starts just talking about how each individual is capable of doing what they need to do in order to survive, and even more than that, as long as they're given the proper like belief and encouragement and all those things that come with it. And I mean, I resonate with that a bunch. I personally believe that, like, people as a whole are pretty dumb, but each person is smart. Like, if you talk to any individual, they're not like they're fully capable of making their own decisions and fully capable of running their own lives. And oftentimes they're reduced down to their most ridiculous behavior, their most ridiculous thoughts. And that definitely detracts from the value that each individual has. But yeah, this organization, Stand Together, believes in funding that rather than like supporting like a large number of politicians. They try to put the money into grassroots organizations, which actually focus on helping individuals to come out of their own problems. I think they did, like, they had a couple campaigns within a single year, and ended up raising $60 million just through that arm of campaigns on its own. And that's a lot more money than you hear get tossed around nowadays. I mean, for grassroots, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
And it just shows that, like, individuals care a lot. Like, if you, like, one of the strategies they used for this is that they would match any donation somebody made up to $1 million. And everybody just started helping. They figured they'd have the entire year to go up to $1 million to match, but they ran out in like 2 days. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And I think that oftentimes nowadays nobody gives credit to just individual humans and the kind of caring power that they have. And it's really sad because everybody's got so much ability to do things and to change things and to change the world. Like, if we can change, like, we're capable of changing our masks. So why do we have such a hard time seeing that we are able to change things greater? Um,
Something you said, and I agree and disagree with, is you said the individual is smarter than the group. And I would disagree on that, mainly because like societies together make all these things happen. But and I agree with what you said after that, is we do not give individuals credit. And that's something I actually learned like this past semester. Was I was just working on a project, and it was for somebody else, like for a customer. And I went into way too much, like, my approach was assuming that they didn't know what they were doing almost. And it made it harder for me to get things done because I assumed that they wouldn't be able to do it themselves. And in turn, I had a much worse time, or could have had a better time had I just realized, like, hey, like, this isn't all rocket science. Like, people can do, like, the customers can do like some things themselves, whether it's like download a CSV file, like just some files from whatever I'm making, and do like analyzing themselves. And I was like, at the end of the semester, I realized, like, wow, I really just did not give them the credit they deserve. Like, these other professors, here I am, like, on my horse, like my, being, just an idiot. And that's, and we started talking about Stand Together, kind of like before even mentioning Stand Together, we were already discussing things like people getting what they need and finding what they're good at in order to solve all these smaller problems and whatever, which is super, super important. I mean, especially now more than ever. I mean, before we even hop into like the different systems that will benefit from grassroots organizations helping out individuals. I mean, what is, I don't know if you're familiar, because I know your mom does it. I don't know if you've discussed, but like, what are some of the things that Stand Together does to kind of like help out individuals find different opportunities and get together?
so Stand Together on its own, pretty much, it more puts people in contact with the proper grassroots organizations. Like it itself is not much of a charity organization. Like it doesn't directly give. It tries to help out the pieces of the larger picture. Um, that's the bottom up solutions thing, where you work with each of the smaller organizations that all are capable of supplying the community with the things that they need, and Stand Together puts the right donors in contact with each of those organizations. And it kind of skips the extra steps that a lot of other charities go into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it skips a lot of those extra steps where they pass the money through a bunch of different hands. Where instead it just hooks donors up with the proper grassroots organizations. That's just from what I know. Again, like I get some information just coming off, but
That's like so pretty much
not a
there's like
part of
a
it.
good middleman, like they just,
Yes.
yeah. So okay, that's sweet. Okay, that actually, I didn't know that. That's cool. They send you to the right people and the right organizations that could help you.
The ones that are already getting things done in the ground
Exactly.
floor.
In there, like for whatever they specialize in. Wow, that's
Yeah.
cool. That's awesome. That broadens a little bit like what my idea of Stand Together was. Where
It's a pretty big idea.
yeah, yeah, because I mean, all these different grassroots organizations, I'm sure, like help out with something different, obviously. So I mean, getting sent to the right one is just a huge step in general to figure out what the heck you're gonna do versus
Saves a lot of time. The organizations
bouncing
don't need to
around and
grow on
stuff.
their own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was trying to think, like, 'cause as we were discussing this problem earlier over text and stuff, different ways that people could start to figure out what are the problems that they're able to solve. I mean, we discussed that this is the education systems, like one of their goals is to show us what the heck we're good at, and
Hmm.
something I saw in a Jordan Peterson video today actually was like his exact expression was, the world is like, the way when we go through it is filled with potential, and we go about, shaping the potential the way we want it to be, and turning it into something real. And this is something that we kind of discussed too, where it's like the world is full of problems, where we take the problems we can solve and solve those, almost like the smaller ones, which got me thinking on like how do people figure out, one, what the problems are, and two, which problems they're even able to solve, you know? I mean, that's like, even if you did know, I guess, what your abilities are, which most people I feel like don't, because that's just straight up what potential do you have,
Yeah.
which takes, I feel like, a whole bunch of exploring. I mean, where do you even find these problems? Like, do you think it's like an issue with maybe lack of experience? When you gain experience, you figure out what you're capable of doing and what problems are out there? Or do you think, I mean, it's a mix of that and education and other things?
Well, I mean, something that Jordan Peterson always says is clean your damn room, because that's one of the problems that you can easily solve. It's right there in front of you. And I think that says a lot about the kind of process we have to undergo in order to solve problems, like the bigger ones. When we start off with the problems that are staring us right in the face, you know, we can just work on it right off there, and that's right there. We've already taken a step towards figuring out the problems that we're good at solving, because we've just gone out and solved the problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, personally, I think that solving the problems that are right in front of us is, one, the best way to live peacefully, because you're not getting harassed by small problems all the time. But it also allows us to just go through and figure out the things that we are good at, like you said. And I agree. Education has a big part in that, because it allows us to get access to all of these problems that are normally way too big for us to deal with. Like, we teach math from the very beginning of education, even though the problems in math, like in like the frontiers of math, are huge, so big that algebra doesn't even like begin to touch it.
Hmm.
But the thing is, you can learn from a very early stage in education if that's the kind of thing you're good at. And I mean, it takes a long time and a lot of thought before you can really figure out the things that you're good at. And I mean, education doesn't do a great job right now of showing us all of the possible problems. Right now, I feel like we're really focused on big problems and not really focused on individual problems. Like, for example, there aren't a lot of like personal finance classes like being issued, and I think that's a problem, because that's one of those things that is literally staring you in the face at all time. Like, people forget to pay their taxes, or just don't pay their taxes all the time, or don't pay their credit card bills, and those problems are staring them right in the face. And I think if people were able to understand like how to solve those problems, they might have a shot at doing it. And I think that already, when you're not able to solve one of those problems that are staring you in the face, you're already very much limited to the number of problems that you can try on and figure out if you're any good at solving them. So that's how I think solving a number of small problems can help you manifest solutions to the bigger problems.
Yeah, that was well said, and actually pretty much explained, I mean, solving the little problems and seeing what they are literally right in front of you. So, like you said, personal finance, which is a big one. I mean, if somebody realizes, like an individual realizes that they have these financial problems, whether it's financial illiteracy or whatnot, and realizing that they can, learn to solve it or whatever, which I like should potentially be part of the education system to do for us. I mean, the least they could do is let us not, get
Dig ourselves a hole with
exactly,
debt.
yeah, exactly, like screw us over with taxes and debt and not learning how to balance budgets and whatnot month to month. But if you're an individual that can realize that that's an issue and solve it, whether it's through some sort of education or even, I mean, now it's like YouTube and stuff, you really do get over that hurdle of, okay, personal finances potentially in check, or at least you're on the way of getting them in check. And then you're right, you can kind of see like, okay, there's an issue with personal finance education in America, like that's a new broader problem, bigger problem that opens up once you solve this personal problem. And yeah, Jordan Peterson does say this a lot. It's the problems like that are, I guess, most relevant to you are the ones you should do first. But it's funny because people do exactly the opposite.
They just do the exact
They
opposite.
don't
Yeah, they
they
just go for
don't
the huge
focus on
ones.
themselves and they're leaving it off. They're like, oh, like I can go save the world. It's like you can barely save yourself. You can barely
Yeah,
save yourself.
people with mountains of credit card debt trying to solve global climate change.
Yeah, oh my goodness. I've been thinking about debt weirdly for the last couple of days, and
Well, it's pressing, man.
it's
pressing, and it's really easy to fall into debt holes.
Mm-hmm.
I think, was it me and you? I mean, somebody else talking about credit card debt and how the credit card companies they require a minimum payment, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't like in any sense of the word like actually pay like much of your bill. So if you just sit there and you pay the minimum payment every single time, you're just going to have a slowly building mountain of credit card debt.
Mm-hmm.
It's super easy to fall into that hole. And I mean, with student debt, I mean, part of getting a career nowadays is getting a college degree, and it's getting more expensive by the day.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's really no other way to go about it other than like taking on this much debt, you kind of have to start to be careful about the other places that you accumulate debt, because it's really easy to just stack up more and more debt from a bunch of different places. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the problems that people have is just taking on a bunch of small problems when they're not willing to even encounter like any of the monsters that come from these problems.
Interesting.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, it's like with debt, it's almost like we're in a weird state now where I mean, it's fake money, like we have Venmo, PayPal, it's just numbers, like nobody cares.
It's
Like
just numbers.
it's just a number on a screen that says something, it's like, whatever, like I'm going to die eventually. I'm not going to have to worry about it. People don't really seem to like care. And, it's almost like there's no plan to like, once you start accumulating debt, I mean, say you don't have like wealthy parents or something, you got loans, you got whatever, you're going 60K in debt for art degree. No offense to people getting an art degree, but it's like,
you have to be ready to encounter those problems.
it's like, it's like, do you know the problems you're going to have to solve in order to, and problems aren't like STEM problems. Like these problems are like, you're going to have to solve major like entertainment problems for people, where it's like you provide a value that's gonna hopefully cover your debt at some point. It's like, if this
You have to be somewhat cognizant of how much you can provide for yourself, though, because while you're providing a really good service, like you said, it might not pay off all the debt. You kind of have to take that into, yeah.
You have to provide some sort of value, and I feel like people are like, I don't know. It's like
they don't think that far ahead.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Oh my God, definitely not now. I mean, it's like difficult to picture like a year in advance. It's like, what the heck's going on? It's
I
like,
feel like our refresh rate's just getting so fast.
yeah. Oh,
Like,
let's talk about that. Oh, like too much information.
Yeah, we have libraries, terabytes and terabytes of information at our fingertips.
Yep.
And the more, I don't know, we want to learn as much as we can because we know information is going to help us. But when there's just so many things to choose from, we're not going to get. It's same thing with podcasting. If we're going to talk about everything, we're not going to get super deep into one topic.
Exactly.
Like if you're skimming the entire internet for information about everything, you're going to get very, very brief pieces of everything and not be able to actually understand anything.
Yeah, big breadth of knowledge, if you can call it knowledge, just tidbits of information, which is something, I mean, I used to do like in any conversation I would have. It's like at the end of the conversation, it would be like a discussion on like, what does this mean? Or, whatever, like, where is this place? And then, I mean, in my mind, I was like, why speculate and waste this time when I can just figure it out right now and like know that for the rest, for whatever. But one, that ruins the conversation, and I learned quickly to stop doing that. But two, like, without, I guess, the conversation and the thinking about it, you're not like cementing in where it like what thought process goes into coming up with the answer.
Exactly.
And like where do you have to dig in your mind to pull out the information that gives you the answer? Whether it's
practicing problem solving.
Exactly.
And when you just take the shortcut and look at Google real quick, because it takes like 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Google real quick and you just totally miss the practice that you could have gotten to using logic and using like information to solve a problem, which is a very useful skill.
and it's in your mind for, half a second for whatever purpose you needed it for, whether it's like to put it in a paper, to use it for homework, to whatever, use it in a conversation. And then because you didn't think about it yourself, you're not going to use it for a long time, likely again. It's just gone.
Exactly.
You're hardly even getting that breadth of knowledge. You're really just getting like a breadth of information with like holes everywhere, because it's kind of like just out. It's gone. There's
all you did was train yourself to look it up. That's all you did.
Exactly. And there's no neural connections that are reinforcing that idea. There's no reinforcement learning, which is
you didn't even practice how to think.
Exactly. And yeah, with that's getting worse with things like Google's obviously not the reason behind this. It's some whatever
the way we decide to use it.
It's a societal movement or a kind of choice and decision to use Google for more needs than we should be using it for.
Yeah.
And on those lines, I mean, like, there's just too much information out there for us to consume in one day. I mean, have you seen Social Dilemma?
Yes, of course. What a wonderful, wonderful piece of art.
For anyone that is listening and hasn't seen it, go watch it.
See it now. Go watch it. Pause the podcast and go watch it right now.
Exactly.
It is necessary.
We'll wait.
We'll be here for you.
And it's so unnerving, but it makes you realize, like, companies, like, social companies, media companies, whatever, are just battling out for our attention. And that's all it is, I mean, yes, some of them provide values and some of them have good morals or whatever, but it's like, all right, they're trying to make money. And more often than not, the revenue model revolves around the advertised model, where you advertise to your users or get them to buy something or sway a certain way and whatnot, or convince them of something. Yeah. And that's how these companies make money. And I was listening to Lex Friedman, his podcast. I forget who it was with and where it came up in the conversation, but he's trying to start like his own company or something, and he got into a conversation with George Holtz. I think he's like a software engineer, but super genius guy. And Lex was saying that for the future, companies are going to have to go away from the advertising model and find a different way to make money. Which I was like, oh, he's so right. I started thinking, like, what's a different way? And I was like, wow, with some thought, I'm sure people can obviously come up with something, but it's like everyone really only uses that model. And it's like crazy that we're all stuck in this internet-wide advertising model that's just all these hundreds of thousands of companies competing for your attention.
Well, I think it's the mindset that's the biggest problem. I think we're starting to get to this too, where we're realizing that while capitalism is incredibly effective, like it upholds personal responsibility, and people are like, desperate to be successful, which is a great mindset to have. It's not great when we're already having super successful businesses simply looking to grow even more. And while it's great that, like, we're on such a discovery trajectory where we're just figuring out better ways to do things, it's rough on individuals, because I don't think the mindsets are congruent. They don't really like run together. Like while it's good that we're finding all these things and we're learning all this stuff about technology and the ways that it can help us, and it is helping us, and because we have all this information now, like it's libraries and libraries right in front of us. That cannot be said less of. Like it's great, but the business mindset there is simply to grow and expand and earn. That doesn't work with individuals who are trying to grow themselves. Like, it's almost like they're competing for who's going to be able to actually succeed. Like, in order for businesses to grow, you almost have to sacrifice the well-being of their users. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize this, that if we change the mindset of these businesses to almost look out for their users more and not just look out for the success of the business, we might be able to see progress on both fronts instead of just progress on the front that doesn't really need it all that much.
That's a really, really good point. Because right now, like, companies are just kind of running on how do we get more money to our shareholders?
Exactly.
Like, that's how, like, that's our model is, and the reason why a lot of companies are going for like advertising models is the easiest one to make revenue from, and in most cases, or selling products. And all these companies are kind of just thinking like, all right, new quarter, got to get profits up. New quarter, got to get profits up. New quarter, and it's like, how are they going to do that? You hire better people, make better products, or
the ones that show results, the people who are willing to do whatever it takes to show results, and the products that will literally show results.
It's almost like these companies are like, I don't want to say shooting them in the foot, because there's always going to be people available for these positions, but they're creating, in a weird way, a lot of overhead for people to kind of, you're right, like they're not on the same page. People are, in a weird way, almost behind, where it's like these companies are so far ahead and they're not slowing down. That's like, if somebody wants to help out from an individual standpoint, it's like there's a lot of overhead to even just get into anything. It's like you're so far back. It's like, how do you even get to the point where you could help with anything that they want to solve or do and accomplish? And one, grow yourself, better yourself, and two, help the company, which really isn't looking out for you. They don't care about you. If you're the top of the top, then, it's all on you to get there in a weird way.
Exactly.
That way. And it's like, I feel like it's the pool of those people is likely decreasing as people realize that there's just so much overhead now to get into any one of these positions of that could benefit you,
Yeah. I mean, it's just another way we're like training ourselves in a bad way. Like, we're training that practice of success at all costs. The more that we give attention to it, and the more that we like reward those practices that are just like, gimme, let's do as well as we can. The more we reward those, the more difficult it'll become to bring in people that are willing to, slow down a little and like, I don't know. I don't want to say care about the things that matter, because that's a little subjective, but to look out for their users. Like, if the most successful company throws their users under the bus, all the less successful companies are going to look at that and be like, okay, this is what works. And I feel like once we have companies that are willing to look out for their users, and companies that don't want to get success at all costs, I mean, they're already successful beyond imagination. But like, I feel like that's the kind of change that we kind of need. I mean, that's a very difficult thing to do. Like you said, like the overhead of this feedback loop is almost insurmountable, especially for an individual.
Actually, there's something weird. So you said like, so I thought about this a little bit a while back, where what affects what? Is it the big company doing something that affects what smaller companies will do and future companies will do? Or is it the smaller companies doing things and they all kind of start doing it, taking away the market share from the big companies, and the big companies tag along so they can keep their majority share? So, and I think this splits between things like policy versus technology. So a company like, say, like Amazon, right? Amazon, big company, hard to take down, kind of can, a lot of things are expendable. A lot of people, they can try out a lot of things, they have a ton of money. But say like a smaller company was to take on Amazon, if they took on like a more like eco-friendly approach, I think more and more people would slowly shift over to that small company, hence growing its market share in a weird way. And I think especially now, just kind of with the mindset of like where people are at in society, at least in America, and then I think that would affect Amazon's future policies, that they're like, oh wow, like people actually want this. All right, let's do it. We're going to lose some money, but in the end, we'll get more of the market again. We'll come back to like, their top level, base level.
Exactly.
But that's with like policies. I feel like things like so that's like social pressure, But when it comes to like technology, I mean, it's definitely the other way around. Actually, I take that back. It's definitely not the other way around. But if a big company did something and it worked, everyone's just going to follow. People are going to be like, oh, this is working. Let's quickly hop on that train, quickly oversaturating. Then the big companies with more money will just do something else new and continue in that direction and be at the front line of that advancement. But at the same time, if a new company does something, they just get acquired or they just get copied, and the big companies do it for less. Like, Amazon does this all the time. They just pretty much steal products, which was like, I mean, all these companies do is just steal smaller ideas or acquire these companies, and it really is like a monopoly. It's crazy, but
I mean, that's like the best part about capitalism is the things that work, like they're rewarded.
mhm,
And you're right. I mean, I think smaller companies definitely have some power here
mhm,
because if they happen, if like because they've got like, a lower capital overhead, they're spending less money. They're able to experiment with ideas that are a bit more like out there.
mhm.
And I mean, if they find something that works more like in the rest of the smaller companies do the same, like you said, I feel like because we're based on capital and because like whatever will like earn the most money, like and bring the most customers in are the things that are going to be practiced and rewarded, like you said. I mean, it's definitely possible for the smaller companies to get their leg up, but you just have to they'd have to be able to grow on their own. And like you said, like the bigger companies are just going to buy them out like
Yep.
as soon as they're like profitable enough. And you just have to hope that those good practices translate to the larger company that just like consumes them.
Yeah.
And I mean, even like even then, it kind of brings once you start to think that like smaller companies are capable of creating change, it almost like promotes the idea that individuals are totally able to like play a part and make their own changes themselves. Because if it doesn't take much to manipulate the scene, then we just have to. It's just trial and error for the most part. Like we just have to find the things that work, and then we have to make sure that we reward the processes that work and don't continue to support the processes that are taking away from discovering more things.
Exactly. And I mean, even in the case of literally this podcast, I mean, I'm on episode, this is going to be episode 2, but it's like, I realized with this last like year, maybe 2 years in college with my housemates, I was like, I would say I'm fairly independent, but I quickly realized like, because, I live with a couple different majors, like we are really of different skill sets. So it's like one of them is more creative, a ton more creative than me. Um, like you, for example, more musically talented, like creative in that aspect. And
Oh shucks.
that's why I literally have your song like at the start of this. And once I realized I really don't need to do everything myself, that's when the group becomes stronger, which is the bottom up approach. You have all these people with different skills, you bring them together and you have something
On the
that's
top.
hopefully good,
Yeah.
and then I mean, there's this concept in computer science where they're called sprints, where every week or every 2 weeks, whatever length you choose a sprint to be, you at the start of the week, or start of the sprint, you plan the sprint, delegate tasks, you have deadlines for each task for each person, and at the end of the week, first week, you kind of like review like where is everyone at? Do you need help with this? Blah blah blah. And then by the second week, ideally everyone finished all their little tasks and they move on to the next little tasks. I mean, it's literally just reaffirming everything we've talked about today. It's all the little tasks get delegated. You put the trust in the right people and make sure that their skills align with either what they're able to do or will be able to learn to do. And in turn, you get this cohesive, application or product or whatever it is, this service. And that's kind of the way I've been thinking about this podcast is like I asked you for music. I looked through a couple of your different things and found that worked. I looked into our mutual friend Camille. I was like, hey, like I need help with designing. I need help with this. I shot a bunch of podcast name ideas through one of my housemates. I was like, just sending him a list. I was like, hey, like, do any of these sound good? Like, do any of them make sense? And of that list, Let's Start a Dialogue wasn't even one of them. Like, eventually, like, it just came together, and I was like, wow, this worked out. And that's slowly when I realized is like, wow, like people have their own skills. People
And they're able to do things.
people are
Like,
able. It's not just a one man team. It's really like
you can trust people. It's
exactly.
okay.
Exactly. And if obviously like they don't get it right, whatever, at least you're growing together.
Yeah.
You learn how to maybe delegate people and they learn how to do whatever it is they were doing. It's just, and then you get a cohesive thing. something comes together, and then you just repeat every, I don't know, however long, this happens. And I feel like people need to realize that they can, I guess that's how small businesses work, which is kind of
Yeah.
this topic. It's you get a bunch of people to make a startup or work for a small company, and then you have an idea, you do little sprints, little innovations, and then you get something, and then you use the qualities of all these different people to put something together, and then at the end you could be like, damn, like we put this together. And if one person tried to do it alone, I mean, that's just crazy genius, and there obviously are people like that, but I feel like most people just aren't, and you got to rely on other people that know things that you don't know.
And what's great about relying on individual people, like other people, on an identity basis, every single time that you choose to rely on somebody, that gives them the opportunity to actually overcome the problem, like you said. And that's just another opportunity for them to figure out what they're good at and for them to grow. Yep. And so not only are you getting them to help you, but you're helping them by giving them a chance to try something and to grow from those experiences and to help figure out who you are and what you're good at.
Yep. And it goes back and forth too. I mean, that's all correct, but then it's almost like I owe you one now. It's like you do a favor, makes them comfortable asking you for a favor, and back and forth and back and forth. And you're both, if assuming it's mutual and good or whatever, it lets both parties or both people kind of gauge where they're both at, So it's like I know what I know, but you don't know what I know. It's like, unless we start working on something or talking through these things, we will never find out what either of us knows. My housemates, one of them is a building construction technology. And it's like, he's very creative. It's like, I would have never known that he's creative unless I literally saw him drawing and doing photo editing and stuff. And eventually asking for his help to come up with certain things that I just couldn't come up with. Tasks like that help me kind of get insight onto these different people. And say now, I've asked these things of him, he can potentially ask me to do things for him, knowing some maybe bare minimum about me or what I'm able to do or capable of doing, and then maybe accomplishing it myself, and then growing myself. Then now they know more about me. It's just back and forth of
the feedback loop.
Exactly. It's just mutual reinforcement and feedback and growth and learning. And it's it really does just take overcoming the whole stubborn independence.
It's that barrier, yeah.
Exactly, which is something that I myself have needed to overcome, especially in school.
You're not alone, buddy. You're not alone.
I know, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's you're not alone. A lot of people are like this, where they're either holding themselves back or not doing something because they feel I don't know how to do this. Well, it's you don't have to.
Somebody else about the negative outcome.
It's somebody else already does know how to do this, and they could be one of your friends, your close friends, whatever, somebody you talked to before, and it's just go ask them.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if they're capable of doing it, why aren't you capable of doing it?
Exactly.
I feel like that really lights a fire under your butts, and you're just hey, man, this person can do this. Is there any reason that I'm not able to do this? And even if nobody else has done it before, it's just come on, I could conceive of this.
Exactly.
Surely I must be able to do this.
I mean, I'm speaking more of don't reinvent the wheel, Yeah. Sometimes there may be instances where you don't want help, or you don't want to ask a certain person for help, or for whatever the reason may be, or whatnot. But don't reinvent the wheel. It's if you know somebody that knows. The older I got, for example, especially recently, as you've graduated, I'm about to graduate, I realized that it's our parents become real people. It's
yeah.
They have jobs and they know people and they do their own thing. And I was realizing dang, our parents are in for example, in they work jobs at companies that I would want to work for, right? Your dad, Rick's dad, all these mutual friends. And it's I know these people, so I could ask them for help. But that's the same thing with any other endeavor or what we're talking about, creative processes. It's put it together, but you don't have to do it yourself. It could look really bad if you do it yourself, or you can have somebody that knows what they're doing do it. That's why I'm not going to do my cover art for this podcast, I put up together on Microsoft Paint. Like, it sucks, like I'm just waiting for, my friends that know what they're doing to come back from school, and I can be like, hey, like, help me out with this, please. Like, it's terrible,
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I feel like, how more people need to start doing things where it's not in a weird way, like manipulation either. It's not like you can't do these things one-sided. It really does have to be mutual.
Once you acknowledge the mutual benefit, I feel like it's pretty short.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's something that Charles Cope is like totally about. Something that he preaches a lot is cycles of mutual benefit. Mm-hmm. It's those feedback loops where once you realize that both parties are going to benefit from this, they're going to work so that they're just going to try these things on for size. And once those other people that you like added into the loop realize that working with other people doesn't just help them and they're not just asking for help, that just creates the whole cycle again, where those people are willing to ask somebody else for help because they realize that it's going to benefit both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's something I've always struggled with too. I mean, there's so many people that like I've neglected to ask for help from just because I thought I was burdening them. Mm-hmm. But it's something that other people appreciate. I mean, like, hey, I appreciate helping people out, and like that helps me understand that other people like also help, like, the love to help people out.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, it creates a big explosion of a bunch of people just helping each other help themselves.
Yeah. And it could be for like, in a weird way, negative pretenses. Like if you ask somebody for help, they could be like full of themselves in a way and whatnot and get immense satisfaction from, feeling superior for whatever reason. But it's like, at the end of the day, it's like,
that stops the cycle.
I feel like at the end of the day, okay, yes, it does at that person you're asking for help, because they're likely not to ask for help because they feel they're superior. But at the end of the day, you are still growing from that hopefully interaction, and you can continue the cycle. It's hopefully doesn't stop there. You still get what what you want to learn or need and grow from and go from there. But in the same way, I mean, that's literally just how systems work, and how you've got a slightly bigger problem. You break it down into potentially people that could solve all these problems. If you can't do them all yourself, get them together and you solve together, in a cohesive manner, this bigger problem, and
you're not only solving the problem, but you're also helping those people to solve problems in the future because they've seen the right types of problems before.
Now you're just growing, and now, this is pretty much just how systems solve these big problems. This is actually all just makes sense now.
Growing as a group through individual problem solving.
Grassroots, let's go. Dude, yeah, I mean, it really is just helping people understand what they're able to do.
You help people help people.
Help people, and then assuming there's proper coordination for the right ideas, or for any ideas, you'll grow from it no matter what. Right coordination for any idea, and you interchange people that need to come and go. I guess that's how kind of the workforce goes, and then you solve these.
Well, once those people like figure themselves out more, they realize there are other problems they're good at. So naturally, you're going to have some cycling where like somebody who was forced to solve a problem before realized they're not very good at it, and then they can just go on. They can move on, and that's okay because they're going to go solve some other problems that they've started to understand that they're better at solving.
Exactly.
And it spreads.
Oh, I love it, and it's cool too, seeing like even on a small scale, seeing this firsthand. I mean, things like I guess weed, for example, or no, I'll use drinking as an example. So like, obviously in college, like people are into drinking, but there was times where I, for example, would just like stop drinking, right? Just for whatever reason, like school took priority, a couple weeks and then a few weeks. And then I would see friends and like, on the side sometime and they wouldn't drink as well. And they'd be like, oh yeah, like we saw you weren't drinking. So we decided, oh, that's probably healthy for a bit. Just take a break. And I was like, dang, like you noticed that. So now you're also doing it. And that just shows what I was trying to get at is like these positive feedback loops, where it's like, not, you don't even have to directly do anything, but it just shows you are still affecting people around you, you know? It's almost like you're so
Yeah,
caught up in yourself, you forget that like people do their own thing, and assuming you impact people's lives, however that may be, whether on purpose or not, it's like people, people will see, and what you do and what they want to see, and then potentially take effect based on it, or take action based on it, and it's like
exactly.
really neat to see, not first person obviously, but from like a unknowing perspective. You're like, wow, like that made a bit of a difference. And I think that's how, like,
Yeah,
if you're even more open about it and you're working together to do these things, then solve these problems, it's like, wow, like you can really go somewhere. And then each person in that group will spread the love, spread the feedback loop, connect more people.
yeah. I mean, I've had like similar experiences, like you said, with alcohol and with weed too. Like just having good habits can do the same thing as well. And it all, like, I know that from my own experience, as long as like for a long time I was like scared to like share those kind of things, because if you're in that college environment and you just don't drink, like you think somebody's gonna look down upon you for not doing what the group's doing. But like you said, as soon as like people are exposed to that idea, they might consider the same thing as well. And
Yeah.
I know that like it took it took me like coming out and like admitting things, like for example, like I don't love drinking, or like I think my time is better spent, like I don't know, running or meditating. Other people, like they're influenced by that, and like they want to better themselves. And sometimes all it takes is just, instead of like hiding that from other people, it just to expose your own thoughts to air, and like have other people like have a chance to grab onto it. And as soon as you get those ideas out in the communal space, people are much more likely to pick them up.
And this is big on, wow, full circle, perfect. Bravo us. This is big on finding your own voice too. I mean, something I've been thinking, and actually I'll ask you this question, although I know you'll likely agree, is, or I'll propose this idea. It's like with language and conversation. So say, I mean, there's the rule, I forget what it's called. I think it's the rule of six, or six handshakes is one of these like rules where everyone on earth is connected mutually through six friends in between. So it's like,
Wow.
I know you, you know your dad knows somebody, that person potentially knows somebody that knows somebody else, whatever. And then you can connect everyone in the world that way. It's like six or seven. I forget if it's whatever, however many connections,
But
but
there's math that supports it. That's all you need to
yes,
know.
like, yeah, I think so. And so that gets me thinking, things like conversation and language. If I express an idea to you, it'll only take like a few more people to reach such a big audience. And if that idea is impactful enough, then it is going to get spread. You know what I mean? And
Oh yeah.
it's like if there's a clickbait title on YouTube, it's like it's going to get views because people are going to start clicking on it. If there's a clickbait idea, or a click, like if there's some idea that looks like it's a good idea or sounds good or it's good to talk about, then it's going to be spread around, which happens, I mean, a lot on like social media, unfortunately, and like trendy things, like one thing comes out that's like juicy gossip, then everybody hears about it, because it just spreads
Takes
around.
no time at all because
That
other people
happens
are
with like,
spreading it.
every conversation, every idea, everything. And like you were saying though, which is what I believe in, is the only way that's going to happen with your own voice is if you actually say things and
You
do.
just gotta say it.
You
You
just
just
have
gotta
to.
put it out there.
And for a reason, you need to watch Dead Poet Society, is they kind of emphasize that, where, oh, sorry, I'm burping from my coffee. And
Excuse you.
excuse, Dead Poet Society, they kind of emphasize the whole find your own voice thing, and it's like through poetry and through poems, but it's like super moving. And I'm not going to go into it, but I think it's so true that there are times where it's like people feel unheard, but I feel like it's not necessarily, it might not be their fault, but it also might be their fault where they're just not speaking out. That's a lot to do with, I mean, like overthinking, feeling like your ideas aren't worth it for whatever reason, being too scared to put out these ideas, feeling you're wrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, I just say it out. Like, you never know if people agree, don't agree, or want to talk about these things, and you can figure it out together,
Yeah,
which is super important. And then if it's a good enough conversation, you will impact their day and they will talk about it, in their own way, and it'll spread that way, which is something, I mean, it took me a while to like realize, like, in the same way you can trust people, you can talk to people, you can say things and be wrong and either be disliked or liked, but it's like
you
your
learn from that no matter what.
your ideas out there, and either you learn from it or they learn from it, or I mean, both of you learn from it in some way. It's like, just get your ideas out there. It'll make yourself known. Otherwise, no one's gonna have any idea.
Exactly.
And there's no way you can either affirm or think about, more deeply on what you're thinking and saying, because no one's there to kind of like help you converse through it almost,
Exactly. And I feel like a lot of people are scared to speak their minds because they're worried about what it might mean for them. Like if their people are just not going to like them, or if their ideas are stupid or whatever. But in order for, I mean, once I feel like that's not really a downside, because once you understand that those ideas don't go with everybody else, it gives you a better sense for like the kinds of things you should be thinking about. Like if you share an idea and everybody thinks it's absolutely terrible, it gives you a sign that maybe you should be like thinking about other things. And I mean, well, I feel like a lot of people, myself included, will be really quick to take themselves down for bad ideas and for ideas that don't resonate with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that should be the case. I mean, I think you go a lot farther taking that not personally but seriously.
Yep.
You take the results of sharing your ideas seriously. And if it works, it's not your success. It's just an idea that works, and you should probably be working to promote it. And if it's an idea that doesn't work, you shouldn't take it as you're an idiot. Like it's simply an idea that doesn't float. So just avoid ideas that are enough like that. And it almost allows you to like work on creating that identity, working on creating the thing that creates ideas.
Yeah. So I agree and disagree. So before I even say what I agree and disagree about, I just want to say one thing with this podcast that I want to do is let people be critical and myself be critical when I don't agree, which is why I'm like disagreeing with you right now. It's let's have this conversation.
Yeah.
Where something you said was, and obviously it's kind of difficult to explain every detail of every idea and the minute details, but the things like if there's an idea that goes around by people and it's almost reaffirmed to you a lot, and if you agree with it, okay, then you have this idea that you agree with, that everyone else agrees with, cool. That's kind of like just the social group you're in. But you have to also remember that whatever the contrary of this idea is, there are people that likely believe it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if a lot of people are spreading and believing in an idea that you don't necessarily agree with, although it's important to take in their claims to why it's a good idea, and I think you should take into account why so many people think it's a good idea. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it's if a lot of people are thinking it's a good idea, it's like, damn, like there's a reason why it's being
disseminated.
Exactly. And if it disagrees with you, you should really look into your own idea and like kind of do the whole logical thing, the thinking of, all right, what works? Why does it work? Why does it not? You have to really do some, it's not problem solving, but you have to break down your own idea or argument and compare it to the one that is spreading or works. And
I think that just promotes like exposing your criticism, though.
Exactly. You need to be critical of not only other ideas and new ideas, but your own, realizing that you got those ideas somehow. It's like those aren't like your own ideas. Those are either taught onto you by somebody else. You picked it up and affirm your own beliefs for whatever reason. It's like you have to, once you realize like you're not only right, it's like then you can get into real critical conversations and get down to the nitty gritty of like how am I gonna adjust my argument, or how am I gonna explain to you why my argument is the case, whether you agree with me or not. It's like you need to be ready with these like rebuttals and reasoning and examples.
Just to say it, you just gotta say it. You just gotta come out with it.
Exactly, and that's it. And people need to actually discuss, the differences in their arguments, and that's the only way people may be able to understand the differences. If people are only looking at ideas that reaffirm their own ideas, like, what are you learning? What's the point? At that point, just don't look at any new ideas. Like, you already know what the answer is. It's like, what's the point of that, though? You're not.
There's no growth there. There's no growth there.
Exactly. You're not growing. You're not experiencing anything new. And so I was disagreeing that if it's a good idea, you should take it on, and if it's a bad idea, you should stay away with it. Because obviously this is kind of like a minute detail that should be obvious, but maybe isn't. It's like you can't take everything face value. Maybe it's not the best idea just because it's spreading. It could just be trendy.
That's totally reasonable.
And same goes with bad ideas. The bad idea could be the best one. It could just be nonsense and insane at first until somebody does it. But I do agree that it definitely also does show you kind of at least where your social group and the people you're around, their ideas and kind of headspace is at. And that's why that's not why we're around the people we are, but I mean, you are the average of the 5 people you're around. You know what I mean? It's like, let alone like us being either in college or just out of college and the people we hang around with. It's like, those are the ideas that we're around all the time. And if that's the case with like college, like your 4 years in college, you've got the ideas that most of your college has, like whatever your environment gives you, it's like, that's kind of where you're at. So I think it's, it's a tough mix of gauging where everyone's at, but also being critical of where they're at and where you're at and adjusting, which, but obviously nothing's black and white. So that's, it's just,
well, I really like what you said about how like we aren't really any of our ideas. Like, we're basically an amalgam of, 1, the 5 people you're around most, and 2, every experience we've ever had.
Mm-hmm. And
I mean, I think that takes some of the pressure off of sharing ideas, just because like once you realize that they're just ideas created from other people's ideas, there's almost no reason not to share it.
Yeah, and there are like original thinkers, like people that I guess come up with ideas, but it's like, who gives them those ideas? It's like,
they're pieces of other ideas. Those original thinkers just happen to be really good at using it.
Exactly. Whether it like sparked through their environment or like maybe like something happened to them, whatever, they're getting it somehow, and then they're telling it to somebody else and seeing if it sticks. Is it a good idea? I don't know. We'll find out once I tell this person, and then maybe they'll tell somebody else, and then it'll get reaffirmed, through conversation, which I think is super important. We're, I don't want to say currently lacking, but I feel like some of the systems we have are toxic as heck for
There's a lot of echo chambers around here from what I can see.
Yeah, that, and
like, where the ideas are going just nowhere.
Yeah, and it's like difficult to have productive critical conversations. I mean, I feel like people just lose interest either so super quick, or with just like the only way to do it being through comment sections of social media. It's like, what am I going to tell you in 200 characters that I'd be able to convey properly versus a 2-hour podcast? It's like,
exactly.
Not even podcast, a 2-hour conversation. It's like,
if there's no discussion, you're not gonna be able to get anywhere, because there's not enough time for people to expose their ideas to the air.
But it's like, when are people, especially now, it's like, when are people connecting with people on that level and for that reason? Everyone's either everyone's inside, no one's connecting, no one's conversing. The only conversations we have are through email and text and Instagram comments and Twitter, and it's like, wow, we're screwed.
It's even harder when half those ideas are poached and just absolutely just destroyed because they're criticisms, regardless of whether or not they're fair. I mean, like, I believe in equality, but like, if we're not allowed to expose ideas, there's an issue here. That means even if there's just one small like idea that's not allowed to be exposed, I feel like that is it's negative towards the rest of discussion, because we're not allowed to incorporate the entire picture.
Yeah, and it's like this whole, going back to the attention span of people. It's kind of like, it's almost like there's so much information, we only read headlines,
Yeah.
and we only have we put so much more emphasis on these shorter things and ideas and expressions. So like we take we put more value almost into, or importance, I guess, into a tweet or an Instagram comment or
Short little pieces
a
of information.
headliner, and we're like, wow, like this is saying a lot. This must be it, without actually going over any other aspect of it, and that's why everything is so just, I don't even know.
Well, I mean, we have like, as humans, I learned this when I was spending a lot of time studying for an exams and doing stuff like that in college, like budgeting my time. I started to realize that, I can't like work the entire day. Like there's only so much focus that I can expend on any given day. And then I, looked into it, did some more research, asked some of my professors what this is all about. And I mean, people are finding that there is what we consider to be like an attention budget. Like we can only really focus on so many things throughout the day before like it gets full, and we're literally just not able to take in anything else. And that totally says like so much about what you said about how we're only able to take in like little pieces of information because we're trying to get like these huge pictures when all we can do is take a little bit because there's only so much space like that we have in entirety. And I mean, I feel like that goes across domains as well, where that works with attention, but like it also works with information. Like we can only take in so much every day, and we can only like really focus for a certain amount of time.
I've heard of the like attention focus budget that kind of idea, and it's so true. And I think where I heard it from, they were saying that it's obviously gone shorter because it's just like, and you kind of almost brought this up, or I think you did, where you said that you're trying to get a big picture. We're trying to make these big pictures, and we're trying to get so much information from a compressed.
We're trying to increase the efficiency.
Exactly. It's like so we see like a comment or something or a headline, and we're trying to create the big picture ourselves just from that headline. And I think that's where a lot of like dilution comes from, in these. It's like, and I'm different from you. If we read the same headline and create the big picture of what it's supposed to mean, like it's gonna be super different,
Oh yeah. And I mean, the further away you get from each piece of information, the more different it's going to be. I mean, there's actually a great literary example of this. I mean, I know you've read Dune, so I know you're familiar with there's one passage where they talk about a cloth attached to a stick. And as when the wind blows, the points that are further away from the stick are like just so far, they're so much farther away, like along the cloth, they're so much farther away from the stick. And it's basically a metaphor like for entropy in general. Like if you start from like its base and you have to get all the way to the edge of the cloth, it's going to be like so much further away. So like you were saying, we each have our own, like we see the stick, and our thought processes are basically the cloth, where we're trying to get all the way to the end of the cloth and still be in the same location. Like we can't predict the end of
it just spreads out. It's just like,
it just spreads out into complete entropy. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like we have to generalize all of these small little pieces of information, and that just doesn't work because we're also creative. We're also creative, and we take it in a bunch of different directions.
Yeah,
and the cloth,
exactly.
by the end of the cloth, it's all over the place because you never know.
And which is cool. I mean, once I learned that like people actually listen to podcasts, like not one of the reasons why I made a podcast, but the market for podcasts is growing. Not market. The people listening to podcasts is growing. And it's like, wow, like it's cool that people want to listen to long form stuff now, for whatever reason. I don't know if it's, for car rides or,
I think it's for lack of like big pieces of discussion. Like you're saying, where all we get are these tiny little pieces of information, and rarely are we seeing huge pieces of information.
Yep.
We're addicted to it. We're desiring.
And what's cool is like you watched the first episode of this, and I think what happens is like people listen to it if it's an interesting conversation or something, they have their own questions, and they can then discuss those questions, either look it up themselves or discuss it with somebody else. And it just kind of like allows you to kind of start thinking about outside of the conversation that was had. I mean, we're going to look back on this conversation and say, wow, we could have discussed so much more.
Yeah.
We could have branched off, like, in any way, same as the cloth analogy. It's like you could branch off in any direction and get to a total different point. Yeah, it's cool that people really are going back to long form media. Hopefully, it stays that way and people kind of start realizing that the short bits are pretty useless, besides creating some sort of sense of, I guess, what's trending or what's popular or what's kind of being discussed currently that should be discussed.
But the discussion itself, I just hope we learn to use both, because like those little tidbits are still super helpful for, like you said, like, gauging how everybody else like thinks in a microcosm of the situation. But then we can also learn to use the long form conversations in order to properly discuss and evaluate these ideas.
What's tough too, though, is because everything is an advertising model, a lot of people are fighting for our clicks, and these headlines can be so not even misleading. They're just, is innocuous the word, where it's like you don't even know what it's talking about. It's like you read it and you're like, what the hell is this article about? Like, what could they even discuss? It just leaves it so open-ended. You're just like, like, I don't even know what to think about this. Or it's like it's clickbait, it's just trying to get your attention, and the short attention.
I think and I mean, I think having the vague titles is helpful to get people to get into the bigger article where there is somewhat of a longer form discussion.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But the problem is, it's there for something constructive, those small titles. Like, it helps people get to the longer bits where the things are actually discussed. But like we've been saying, there's just so many long form conversations and discussions like kind of being had individually, like with articles and all that stuff. But because there are so many of them, we just can't get into all of them. So we just look at the small bits. We're basically just misusing the small bits and taking each of those headlines to mean the longer form discussion, when there are probably nuggets of information in there that are either incredibly helpful or so unhelpful they're worthy of disqualifying the entire article. And usually people aren't reading that, so they can't give articles that have like meta titles, they can't give them the credit that they maybe deserve for having good nuggets in there. And they can't disqualify bad articles that had great clickbait titles because they're not actually reading it,
Yeah. Actually, that was a good point, where you said, like, these vague titles actually incite people to click on the article.
And to get into the long form discussion. Yeah.
Hoping that people actually read it and whatnot. I mean, that's a totally different conversation.
Yeah. It's such a problem, but we just have to do it on our own and spread the idea that I actually went through and read this article. And when you say something like that, people are just like, oh wow, I have not been reading articles. And then they'll go out and read articles and create a new positive feedback loop, and hopefully they'll share articles with the intention of other people reading the article.
Yep. And so you brought up Dune, and that reminded me of probably my favorite quote from it, that kind of ties back into kind of becoming, like, solving problems and becoming who you want to be, in a way. It's and the kind of the ideas you have and expressing those ideas. And I believe it was, the day shapes flesh and flesh shapes the day. And it's kind of like your environment affects you. It affects who you are, who you become, and what you're capable of doing. But it's also, you have the physical ability to change your environment and express ideas and exchange ideas and do all these like physical things that humans are able to do, so you can pretty much affect your day. You can affect your environment and the things. And I think that nicely just ties up what we discuss and what we talked about. And
for real, that's
I know we can talk for hours, but Griff, I think we're hitting 2 hours. And
no problem, man.
I don't want to turn this into a two-parter.
We'll have to come back in the future.
we're gonna definitely come back in the future. Hopefully, next semester, I do have some nice ideas for a little set studio. So,
Can't wait.
I'm excited for you to come down and do this again.
Yeah, man. I hope we can do it in person. I'd love to actually be able to, smell you. I just want to, that just adds a whole new dimension to the conversation. Being able to smell the person I'm having a conversation with.
Oh, absolutely. And what I learned from my last podcast was with Professor David Sella was we could even exchange some microbes along the way. We can shake hands and our microbes will intermingle. Maybe some
bring us closer together.
Exactly. All right.
And one day we'll be able to share everything with each other.
Yeah, which is scary. I mean, give it 20 years. That's what people are saying. I mean, not even.
Soon everybody will just be the same person.
Singularity. But
with the same ideas.
Shit, we're screwed. All right, sweet, dude. I feel like once we got going, it was pretty easy. I feel like
yes. Wait, hold on. Are we still going?
Recording. I mean, whatever. This is just the outro at this point.